Hi, friends. Hello. It's me here again with another YouTube. Uh, in case you have been wondering about the noise in the background, it's that waterfall. It's a man made waterfall, obviously, but we live right next to it. So, hence the noise. Okay. Um, Yesterday we published um, historical episode of the Lion Faced Guru podcast. If you haven't heard of such a podcast. Again, it's called Lion Faced Guru podcast here on YouTube that you can find. And I think we published our 23rd episode just yesterday, which was is an interview of one of my longtime students called Bodhi from Sweden. And just a few words of Lion Faced Guru podcast. We started it 10 years ago to discuss our experiences and knowledge about, sharing pragmatic, practical information about the art of awakening and enlightenment without any high-flying, esoteric nonsense, nor high-flying philosophy. So in a really down-to-earth, understandable manner, we have done those podcast episodes. So if it's a new thing for you, if you haven't heard of it, do check it out. There's lots of uh, immensely valuable practical information there about awakening, healing of trauma, meditation practices, awakening, tantric practices, all of this that we do in Open Heart. Uh, okay, so in relation to Bodhi's interview yesterday, uh, in case if some of you haven't seen the episode yet, I will just give you the basic basic information what was discussed and why. So first of all, Bodhi, as I said, he's a long-term student of mine. He's been a student of mine for 10 years, which means that he's been an open heart practitioner for 10 years. And he's Swedish. He's a layman. He has never lived in a monastery or a monastic setting. He has never in his life spent time in residential training, lived in a meditation center, Dharma center. He has never done that. But having said that, for the past 10 years, he has done his home practice and also joined many of our retreats, like short retreats, long retreats. And he has also regularly visited me and us, for example, here in our present center in Slovenia. So just engaged layperson's practice. And, he works full time. He's married. He has 3 small children with his lovely wife. And that's who he is. And the reason why I said that this newest podcast episode is historical, kind of from a couple of different perspectives, is that uh, he attained full enlightenment 3-4 months ago. And some of you will immediately go, like, get really upset about the sentence that I just said. But I'll briefly explain what it means, just like I did in that podcast episode. So different yogic methods, meditative methods, they have different, uh, theoretical explanations of what enlightenment is. But, you know, we practice according to the Mahayana Buddhist teachings and doctrines, Mahayana Buddhist teachings. And in Mahayana Buddhism, there are very clear criteria what this full enlightenment or Buddhahood, Sambodhi in Sanskrit, what it is. And in very simple terms, it means that uh, when we have, you know, in open heart, we speak of two different energetic bodies called causal body and astral body. And causal body is the one that you uh, purify through emptiness meditation, whether be it sutra or tantra style. And then there is so you remove the self-based ignorance uh, through emptiness meditation. And then there is the second energetic body, subtle body, called astral body, which stores all kinds of emotional negativity as well as psychological trauma. And emotional negativity means that it also stores selfishness. So it doesn't store self-delusion, but it stores this selfishness, such as arrogance and pride, uh, jealousy, greed, and so on. So these are the two main bodies that all internal yogas are concerned about and interested about in returning those two into their original, pure, pristine state. Okay, so all Buddhist meditation methods work with these uh, two subtle bodies, and the main two meditations to work with the two are Vipassana and Shamatha meditations. Vipassana for the causal body, Shamatha for the astral body. And so this is just a nutshell explanation, not a full lecture, but just to give you an understanding, just to help you understand the point that I'm making about this full enlightenment thing. So we are talking about, when we are talking about these two energetic bodies, we are talking about completely purifying them, removing causes of self-delusion and removing all causes of selfishness and psychological trauma. So we're talking about removing all of them and actually returning those two subtle bodies into their natural state. Okay, so this is you go to any Buddhist teacher or your internal yoga teacher, and they talk about this exact matter, perhaps using a bit different terms, uh, giving a bit different instructions. But this is the bread and butter of the so-called internal yogas, the yogas of awakening and enlightenment, the yogas concerning these two subtle bodies, causal and astral. And then there is the third body, which is this physical body. So, what does purification or opening of the physical body mean? It means that the astral body has an impact on the physical tissues over time. So, if somebody is psychologically traumatized, that trauma over time uh, will have an effect. It has an impact on the physical tissues. Same thing if we are talking about if somebody doesn't have psychological trauma, but uh, just a basic common selfishness in the form of pride, arrogance, and so on. This also has an impact on the physical body. It kind of, if I use this analogy, that the astral body and whatever is stored in that uh, leaves like a bruise on the physical tissues. And when working with or opening the physical body, we are talking about fascia. We are talking about two different aspects of the physical body. So fascia gets impacted by whatever is going on in the astral body. And then secondly, all other tissues. So fascia and other physical tissues. And when we are talking about the so-called full enlightenment, we are talking about uh, removing all these causes of self-delusion and selfishness and imprints from the physical body 100%, completely remove them, and also activating these uh, energetic bodies, which means that there are many channels, energy centers, and so on. So they also have to be activated. So this is, in a nutshell, what full enlightenment, sambodhi, Buddhahood means, that all three bodies rest fully in the so-called natural state, Buddha nature, wakeful nature, likeness with God. So this is what full enlightenment is. And I hope it's understandable, because this theory is it's very simple, isn't it? Uh, we are basically talking about that, our whole system, all of our uh, mental functions and content, emotional functions and emotional content, psychological functions and psychological content, and physical body needs to be resting in this. All of all of us needs to be resting in this natural state. And this is full enlightenment. And it's really logical also, because uh, you know, there are no like heavenly bodies related to full enlightenment. What full enlightenment in yoga and dharma means is that we are simply returning all our bodies into uh, their original pristine condition. So coming back to this, what I said a few minutes ago, I have one student who has successfully accomplished that, and that's my friend, my student Bodhi from Sweden. And now I'm getting to the point that I want to make. So Bodhi has been practicing for 10 years. He's been practicing as a working layman. Now in recent years, for I think his oldest child is 7 years old. For the last 7 years, he's been practicing, um, using time in sitting in the buses and subway going to work, and a little bit at home. But so we're talking about like proper commitment to practice, but we're not talking about like a full-time training in some monastery or residential center. So I just wanted to say this so that you get an idea of his commitment in terms of time, what kind of amount of uh, like how many hours he might have practiced these 10 years. And it's not much, like it's not even close to monastic life or being in a retreat in a cave or in a retreat hut, much less. But here comes exactly the point, the differences between methods. So Bodhi, my 39-year-old friend, has been practicing the Dharma for about 10 years. And now he has 4 months ago uh, attained, reaped the ultimate fruit. Ultimate fruit of all yogas, meditations, Dharma training systems, according to Mahayana and Vajrayana tantric uh, tantric views. And then I started, you know, thinking about something that I have talked about a lot over the years, is just to raise the question and point out, you know, question the efficacy of yogic methods, and of course, uh, those methods that aim at this full enlightenment, which all traditions do. But then somebody who I really admire, oh, my arm is getting tired. Somebody who I really admire in the world of Dharma is Garchen Rinpoche. Garchen Rinpoche is a Tibetan Buddhist master who now is today in 2026 is 90 years old. And he attained Buddhahood about 10 years ago, maybe 2016, 2017. And I remember because what we do a lot in Open Heart is that we analyze what happens in our practice, when we have awakening experiences and purification and healing of traumas, we closely observe what happens in the subtle bodies and the physical body. So we do this analysis all the time to ourselves and to others. It's a form of learning and study in our system. And well, it's a long story, but I started learning this analysis from my late Zen master and Zen art master Terayama Roshi in Japan over 20 years ago. So I have a quite long history with this. But anyway, this is what we do. And I remember 10 years ago listening to Garchen Rinpoche's talks in YouTube, watching his videos, and I noticed that there was a clearly noticeable difference in his presence. And then sometime afterwards, one of my students sent me a link to a video where Garchen Rinpoche, I can't remember the exact quote, but he said something like, now I can die happily because I have finished my practice. Which means when a Dharma master says that, it means that, they are done with all practices. They have finished all this training, all these paths, and they have reaped the ultimate truth of Buddhahood. So I have the highest respect to Garchen Rinpoche. I think he's a fantastic, fantastic being who has tirelessly worked for the benefit of all beings and his students for many decades. But the question here that I want to make is about the efficacy of methods and efficacy of practices. So Garchen Rinpoche is somebody who was recognized as a young boy, as a young child, as a reincarnation of some past Dharma master, probably the previous Garchen Rinpoche, which means that he was exposed, he grew up in Dharma training environment. My arm is getting tired again. So he was exposed and started training in Dharma, in the art of enlightenment as soon as he could walk, So like, but whether he, I assume that he started his training, started learning about prayers and practices and so on at very young age, maybe before the age of 10 years or so, which means that if and when he became enlightened at the age of 80, he wouldn't be practicing all day long, all his life, for 70 years. And we have to remember that he was in a Chinese prison camp for almost 20 years. But in that prison camp, he was together with other monks, practitioners, and I probably remember this correctly, that he actually met his main guru. I think his name was Kempo Munsel. I might be wrong about this, but that he met his main guru in that prison camp. So he actually lived even in prison camp with a enlightened master. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it took him 70 years to attain full enlightenment with the method that he's following and teaching. 70 years. And if we zoom out a little bit, there are not that many, very few. um well, there used to be more from that last generation of Tibetan masters who were trained in Tibet. There used to be many more Mahasiddhas, enlightened masters, but now that first generation, Garchen Rinpoche is also 90 years old, so now they are almost all gone. Uh, but if we zoom out this a little bit, at present living, following those exact same practices that Garchen Rinpoche did, his guru did, the other Mahasiddhas who are now Tibetan masters who are now gone, the percentage, the success rate of them actually attaining Buddhahood is not that high. On the contrary, it's very low, I would say. Very low. And this is something that I've spoken in recent YouTubes of mine, that can you then really say that the teachings of a certain tradition are a method or not? Because the term method suggests that it gives results in a, how do you say, accountable, trustworthy manner, that it actually gives the fruit uh, regularly, regularly. And, I'm not asking this to upset anybody or to criticize anybody, but I'm just asking a valid question here. Like, if we are talking about enlightenment methods, uh, like method should be something like a factory line. So if a factory makes cars or bicycles or whatever uh, products, we assume that the bicycle that just came out of the production is as good as the 10 previous ones and the 10 next ones. So, this is what a method means, that there are consistent results. But this cannot be said. This really cannot be said of any established Dharma tradition out there today, because the results, the factory line simply is not producing, uh, giving consistent results. So this is why I don't think that you can call all these uh, methods of practice that have been preserved so carefully for generations. I do not think they can be called methods, because the consistency in results just isn't there. So that's a perfectly valid question to ask, isn't it? And to my surprise, very few people ask this, but it's a very, very central question, because, well, maybe I will continue about this in other videos, but uh, when the whole Mahayana Dharma, the whole tantric methodology is there for ordinary deluded sentient beings to remove their causes of delusion and causes of samsara, like selfishness, emotional pain, suffering, you know, you gotta have practices and methods that you can rely on, isn't it? You cannot just, uh, if we want to attain this Buddhahood, we really need to ask and demand practices that deliver, practices that work. And if it takes 70 years to attain Buddhahood, not to even mention that Garchen Rinpoche probably didn't, when he took rebirth and he was recognized as a tulku, as a rebirth of a past master, he probably didn't begin from zero, like from completely unawakened state. So how will his method work for you and me who start from zero boomy, from completely unawakened state, who get entangled with um, gross selfishness, get entangled with psychological trauma, complex trauma, developmental trauma. You know, if you think about this, it is highly questionable if the ancient methods are suitable for people of today. And even if they were, who has 70 years for practice? Who has 70 years? Nobody has. You're lucky if you, make it to 70 years alive. But for most Westerners, we don't start practicing from the womb, but uh, at earliest in early adulthood, if not later. So, if you do the math, the if you do the math, it just doesn't add up, or at least it doesn't add up to me. And this doesn't take, you know, it's great that Garchen Rinpoche attained Buddhahood, but yeah, well, maybe you get the point. Maybe I already made it. On the other hand, if and when, I personally think that the monastic system of like Eastern monasticism, let's put it this way, will never become a thing in the West. It will perhaps uh, remain as a small thing on the side, but it will never become such a thing, widespread thing like it is in the East. But even if it does, most Western practitioners, and by Western, I actually mean modern. So people who live in cities in Europe, Americas, even in Asia. So I really should start using the word modern rather than Western. But us modern people, we have jobs, we are married, we are in relationships, we have kids, we have bills to pay. So we can't be doing our practices and recitations and uh, dharma activities all day, every day. So this is a demand, in my view. And this is exactly the reason why we have created this open heart Sangha community and the method with it, which meets that demand of modern seekers from where they are, without them having to leave their loved ones or leave their home or sell their whatever they own, leave their careers, but that they can do the practice without having to change any of these things. So this is why open heart exists. And I just wanted to make this point. And of course, also like Garchen Rinpoche is a rare example of somebody who has been successful, fully successful, following a Tibetan Buddhist practices and methods of internal yogas. But the vast majority of masters from Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, or like a wider Mahayana Buddhism, also covering China, Korea, Japan, most of these older masters who are 70, 80, 90 years old, they haven't made it there. So even if they have been working at it, studying, practicing, doing retreats for a lifetime, be it 50, 60, 70 years, they haven't made it to Buddhahood. So it's wonderful that these masters are there, that they inspire so many, and of course they have wonderful Dharma activities, but we gotta ask the question, whether the promise of that samsaric beings, deluded beings, could attain Buddhahood in this lifetime, is met or not. And I'm afraid that the old methods don't are not successful in this way. I realized that when I realized that I've kind of been yelling because it's so noisy here. I can adapt the audio a little bit, make some adjustments so that it's the noise from the river doesn't sound on the video that much. But in case you were wondering why I'm shouting, it's because I'm sitting next to this noise machine behind me. Anyway, bless you all, friends. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one. Okay, bye now. Bye.